Hi, today I'm talking about my coaching philosophy and programming for results. So, first of all, I want to tell you a little bit about me. So, my love for health and fitness started when I was an athlete. I played basketball from second grade all the way up until I played professional basketball in Germany. And I played a little bit after that as well, but that was my main career. So, second grade all the way through professional season in Germany. I also threw shot put and discus from seventh grade until college. I played basketball at Northern Michigan University, and I also threw shot put and discus there as well, and javelin. So I threw javelin for 1 year, my senior year in college. I taught myself, and I ended up getting second place at the conference championships. From a young age, I was very passionate about figuring out how to be the best athlete I could be and worked really hard. I had some amazing coaches along the way who had huge impacts on my life and made me want to pass it on and impact and inspire others and help them see the greatness that's within them. I ended up getting an exercise science degree, an exercise science bachelor's and master's degree, and I have 3 certifications, 2 that apply to most people, that apply to most of the things that I do. So those are the 2 I included. So I have an NSCA Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist certification, an NASM Performance Enhancement Specialist certification, and I'm also currently getting my Precision Nutrition certification. Who I've worked with. So I've worked with so many different types of people with so many different types of goals. And I think that has been awesome for me in my career because you can't do the same thing. The same thing doesn't work for everyone, right? You need to figure out what is the end goal and how to get there efficiently and effectively. So that has been a huge passion of mine. I've worked with athletes from 5 years old all the way up until professional athletes. I've coached college and high school basketball and high school track and field. I've worked with fat loss and general fitness clients. I've helped several people lose over 50 pounds and altogether thousands of pounds from ages 10 up to 75. I've also worked with spinal cord injury and traumatic brain injury recovery patients after physical therapy to continue mobility and moving and staying active. I've also worked with many general movement and fitness clients, people that just want to keep moving and stay healthy. And then I've also worked with corporate clients as well. Currently, I coach groups and individuals at Fieldhouse Gym in Seattle. And I also have my online coaching business at CoachTiffanyKelly.com. Through mindset, fitness, and nutrition coaching, I help impact and empower people. And I'm very excited to announce that in February, I'm hosting a retreat for women only, a fitness and wellness mindset, overall health, body, and life retreat. And I'm super excited about that. If you're interested, shoot me a message and let me know. So, workout programming. Why is it important? There could be several people watching this, so I want to explain how this applies to different people. So if you're working out on your own, you want to make sure that all of your hard work will efficiently get you the results that you're looking for. If you're working with a coach, whether it's in personal training or group training, you want to make sure that that coach has a reason why they're programming your workouts the way they are. The way things are programmed need to progress towards an end goal, okay? I've been to several gyms where I walk in and the coach is just throwing a workout up on the board off the top of their head, and it has nothing to do with the programming that happened before, during the rest of that week. And it's not necessarily programmed in a certain way for a certain reason. It's just thrown up there, thrown together. And that's okay to do once in a while, but honestly, to make sure that we're progressing and that we're moving towards a specific goal and also to stay on track, if you have a reason why you're doing what you're doing and it's moving you in a certain direction, then you're way more likely to stay on track with things. And then number 3, if you are a coach and you're watching this, it's very important to develop your own training philosophy and learning about how to efficiently help someone with their specific goals. So what is the best way? The best way to program a workout is however you or your coach can efficiently and effectively achieve the end goal and desired results. I don't believe that there is one right way. I believe that coaches should work as hard as they can to figure out the methods that work best for them as a coach to help their clients get the results they're looking for and more. I don't necessarily believe that my way is the only way, but it's the way that I'm most confident in coaching and have seen results. So first things first, before we get into the details of how I program a workout and how I would recommend that you do, let's talk about coaching philosophy, and specifically as it relates to fitness. Because an overall coaching philosophy should include several things, like working with people on their mindset, nutrition, stresses, all the things that factor in with wellness, as well as how to communicate with people and how to make sure they're learning as we go, progressing as we go, and getting the most out of our time with them. In a couple of days, I'm going to be sharing a training video on my 5-step system that I use with clients to take them from point A to point B. But for today, I really want to stick with the workout and fitness aspect of an overall transformation. So I'm also just focusing on the fitness aspect of a coaching philosophy. How do you develop a coaching philosophy? Or if you're not necessarily a coach, how do you develop the beliefs and methodologies around your craft? I can clearly remember my very first job out of college. I was in a job interview, and the sports performance director asked me, "What is your coaching philosophy?" At the time, I didn't have an answer. It felt like forever that I was sitting there trying to come up with a good answer. And I literally, I had just graduated from college, and I had coached some people here and there, but I didn't have an actual philosophy yet. So from that day on, I've worked really hard to develop my own, and it changes over time, but there are some core concepts that always remain. And those are some things that I want to talk about next. Developing your own philosophy or your methodologies around your specific craft takes lots and lots of research, learning, watching, practicing, trying what you've seen others do to get optimal results. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of effort, and a lot of the most efficient and effective coaches or the people that are awesome at their craft are very passionate about what they're doing, and they spend a lot of time to perfect it. So today I really want to talk, before we get into maximum workout programming, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about who I learned from that has shaped how I coach and program workouts. And honestly, it was really hard for me to narrow down this list. I wanted to keep it somewhat short and concise. But I wanted to make sure that I wanted to talk about, where I learned some things that have really stuck with me and still stick with me as a coach today. And so first of all, my first job out of college was at Velocity Sports Performance. And I cannot put into words how grateful I am that this was my first job out of college, because the on-job training was amazing. I learned way more in this job and training for this job than I learned in my degrees or certifications. So a lot of the things that we learned and were taught were speed, agility, explosiveness, maximum velocity, all of the mechanics that go along with this, dynamic warm-ups, strength, rep ranges, sets, recovery, energy systems, and so much more. Much of the things that we were learning were how to directly apply them to athletes to help them become more athletic and better at their sport. But a lot of it can apply to anyone, and it still stays with me today. Next are Mike Boyle and Gray Cook. So they brought about this joint by joint approach, and it's basically the principle of alternating joints. The joints in our body alternate for stability or mobility. So stability meaning strong, stable, and mobility meaning that joint is able to move in many different directions, okay, in order to play a part in moving us forward different movements, right? And they also talked a lot about, so Mike and Gray have also talked a lot about how the joint by joint approach relates to ideal healthy movement and injury, pain, imbalances, weaknesses, and dysfunctions. And so these things play a huge role in how I coach people and how I program workouts. So here's a little picture that explains this. So feet, you can see feet are meant for stability. Ankles are meant for mobility. They move in many different directions. Knees are meant to be stable, are meant for stability. They do move forward and back, but unlike other joints, they don't move in multiple directions, just one direction, right? That is one reason why, unfortunately, there are a lot of knee injuries, because knees are meant for stability, but if they end up moving in the wrong direction where they're not supposed to be mobile, that's when we get hurt. Next, hips are meant for mobility. They move in many different directions. The lumbar spine, so the lower spine here, is meant to be stable. The thoracic spine is meant to be mobile. The cervical spine is meant for stability. Our shoulders are meant for mobility, elbows, stability, and wrist mobility. And I want to point out, so the thoracic spine is meant to be mobile, but this scapular thoracic area should also be stable, okay, and as well as the cervical spine. And what happens is when we don't use the range of motion that we should have, we start to lose that mobility in those joints, and then our stable joints try to make up for it, and that's when we start to get injuries. Now, there's a lot of other reasons why we get injuries, but this is one reason. And in today's world, a lot of us are sitting so much of the time, and what happens is our hip flexors get really, really tight. Our glutes get stretched out and weakened, as well as our chest. So our chest gets super tight. Our upper back gets stretched out and becomes weak. And then that leads to injury. So you can see here, if this diagram also shows, if your ankles aren't mobile like they should be, then it can lead to knee injuries. If our hips aren't as mobile as they should be, they're getting really tight from being in the seated position all the time, that leads to lower back injury as well as knee injury. And then, let's see if I can move this. The thoracic spine. So if our thoracic spine gets really stiff and tight, then we can also have injuries in our neck, shoulders, and lower back as well. So this theory and this ideal really plays a part in how I program and how I work with people. Next is Robert Dos Remedios. So he is also known as Coach Dos. He wrote the books Power Training and Cardio Strength. And he is one of the guys, along with Mike Boyle, that really started putting out videos and content online way before, now every coach seems to be doing this. But literally, he was one of the first people that I ever followed. And there's a lot of things that I learned from him and from these books. But the main principle that I learned that there's two main principles that really stay with me and are huge in how I program workouts. One is movement patterns. And I'm going to show you on the next slide exactly what those movement patterns are and what I mean by that. But, one way to program workouts is by body part. So maybe today you're doing legs and biceps, or maybe you're doing chest and back, or chest and tries, or shoulders and legs. People sometimes program workouts by actual body parts. But with this principle, instead of just working on a body part, you're actually working on a movement. So our body moves in many different ways, and in order for our body to be proficient and to stay healthy and to have proper movement and posture, we need to make sure that we're balancing out the different movement patterns that we have and working those movement patterns. So throughout the workout or throughout the week, all of these movement patterns should be balanced out and worked on, and in some cases more than others. So if someone is sitting a lot, maybe you have a desk job, then it would be important to make sure that you're working the posterior chain a lot, because it's becoming weak and stretched out by this sitting posture. So it might be more important to do some pulling and some hip hinging to work on the glutes. And I'll explain that more in the next slide. So the different movement patterns that I'm talking about and that I learned from Coach Dose are hip hinges. So our hips are mobile, and one of the main movements that our body does is hinge at the hips. So that's in exercise terms, we could be doing deadlifts or glute bridges. Next is knee hinges. So this is squatting, and it's actually, like sitting down and standing up. And then single leg hip and knee hinges. So, in walking, we're moving one leg at a time. So it's good to make sure that we're doing single leg movements and not always doing both legs at the same time. So this could be lunges, single leg deadlifts, things like that. And also, to add to that, making sure that we're not just moving in one direction, but that we're also moving in many directions. So sideways, forward, back, multiple directions. Next are horizontal pushes and pulls. So this is, pushing things forward or pulling things back. So push-ups and bench press, pushing something forward, and then pulling is rowing, pulling things back, using your upper back to pull. Next is vertical pushes and pulls. So pushing something up or pulling something down. And then we have rotational movements. Our thoracic spine is meant to be mobile, and our body is meant to move rotationally. And then lastly is isometric core variations. So being very stable in the core and doing different things to challenge that core stability. So there are other movement patterns that we have, but these are the main core movement patterns. The next two people that I want to talk about are Mike Robertson and Eric Cressey. So they created something called Assess and Correct. And it was a video, it was a product, it came with videos, workbook, some other things. And the main principle here is that we need to assess movement. As coaches, we need to make sure that people are moving well, and if there's some dysfunction or immobility, which we all have, we need to make sure that we're not adding things to these people's workout program that are going to make things worse or possibly injure them, okay? So assessing movement, there's an actual movement assessment that they came up with. And I use, I've researched assessing movement a lot. And so I kind of, over the time, have created my own movement assessment, but most of it comes from this, the Assess and Correct that Mike Robertson and Eric Cressey created. And the whole, principle behind it is, are the joints that are meant to be mobile as they should be? Are they moving how they should? Do they have the proper range of motion? And are the stability joints strong and stable? So the assessment kind of goes through and checks every joint and kind of figures out, are those joints that are supposed to be mobile moving well? And in the stable joints, are they strong and stable? And if they're not, wherever there's something that isn't ideal or has some type of dysfunction or immobility, we want to implement corrections to improve tightnesses and weaknesses in order to maintain healthy, pain-free movement and quality of life. So again, this is something that I still use today. I'm watching how people are moving. If someone can't press something straight overhead and I can tell that there's some issue that's forcing them to press forward, then if I keep programming overhead pressing into their workouts, I'm just setting them up to get hurt, which is not good. And then also Mike Robertson created this workout program, or this method of this system, I should say, of programming workouts. And it's called the 7 R's. And it's really well known in the fitness industry. If you haven't heard of it, I'll try to make sure that I have a link that you can click on to go check this out. But basically, it's 7 R's. It's release, reset, readiness, reactive, resistance, regenerate, and recovery. So these are 7 things that Mike Robertson says we should make sure we're incorporating in every workout or in most workouts. Okay, so I'll explain each one. So release is myofascial release. So that could be foam rolling, lacrosse balls, anything that you're using to decrease tone and relieve tight muscle groups. Next is reset. So this is the reboot process. It's optimizing alignment and function. So this is, mobility or stretching. So it could be, if you have really tight hip flexors, it could be, doing some hip flexor stretches. Next is readiness. This is activation. So this is done to increase tissue temperature, improve joint lubrication, increase nervous system temperature. So this could be, getting on the rowing machine for a few minutes. And sometimes, depending on if it's really cold or, if it's really cold in the gym or someone was outside for a long time and they're really cold, sometimes readiness and this activation process can be done a little bit before the release and reset. But that's another topic for another day. So not only is this readiness, these activation, not only can it be some type of movement like rowing, jump rope, running, but it can also mean activating specific muscle groups. So on a day that we're going to do heavy deadlifts where, the glutes need to be working, the core needs to be working well in order to protect the back, we'll get those muscle groups activated by doing some type of lightweight or body weight movements that are turning on those muscles. So turning on the glutes, turning on the core, turning on the lats, and getting them ready to go before we put the full stress on them. Next is reactive. So there's been a lot of research that shows that doing some type of power, explosiveness, plyometrics before actually getting into the strength training can have awesome results and awesome benefits. And then next would be the strength training. And then number 6 would be regenerate. So this is the aerobic system or energy system training. And the type of cardio or conditioning or finisher that you do will depend on your actual goal. So if it's an athlete and they're doing a sport that requires a lot of slow but long duration, then their finisher will be more applicable to that. So it could be different depending on the goal that we're looking for. And then finally is recovery. So some light stretching, foam rolling, deep breathing. And this is to shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So we want to make sure that if our body's in fight or flight mode, we want to get it out of fight or flight mode quickly so that we can recover well and move on. So again, this is something that I use, and you'll see when I show you my ideal or the way I program workouts, you'll see a lot of this in there. So my specific philosophy is a culmination of all these things and more. So the next 3 things I'm going to tell you are the main things that I want to talk to you about in my personal philosophy. So I really believe that we need to be programming the minimum effective dose for maximum results. And by that I mean, if we give people high intensity and high, either we're going heavy a lot of the time or we're going super intense a lot of the time, that's going to be really hard to do long term and really hard to recover from for a lot of people. So giving the minimum effective dose for maximum results is really key to make sure that people are staying healthy and that they're able to keep moving long term. It's also very important, I believe, to make sure that workouts are sustainable, safe, and successful. I really believe that we need to be tracking things because if we're not tracking workouts, we're not tracking results, we don't know if we're moving in the direction. We don't know if we're helping people achieve their goals. Okay. And lastly, I really believe this: doing something is better than nothing. A lot of us have this all or nothing mentality, and we think, well, I'm not able to go all out and work out 6 days a week for an hour at a time. I don't have the time for that. So I'm just not going to do anything at all, because if I'm not going to get results, then I'm not even going to try. And unfortunately, that is just really a really bad way to think of it. I know a lot of people who are able to see good results and maintain results by working out 4 times a week for about 30 minutes each time, or they work out 2 or 3 times a week when they can, and other days they just go for a walk or do some stretching. So my point here is just move. Start with what you can be consistent with and then add to it. So if you know in your heart you're not going to be able to be consistent going to the gym 6 days a week for an hour at a time, then don't try to put that pressure on yourself or try to make in your mind feel like that is the best way and the only way, okay? Give yourself something that you know for sure that you can stick to. And it could be a 15-minute walk every day, okay? So doing something is better than nothing at all. Now we're going to get into how to program workouts for maximum results. And this is a topic that could go on for hours, and it really depends on the person and their specific goals. But I work these days mainly with general population people who want to focus on decreasing body fat, increasing lean muscle, and just in staying in shape, right? Or getting in better shape than they currently are. So I'm going to give you a program. I'm going to talk to you about programming for maximum results for this type of person. So first of all, how long should the program be? So I do different lengths of programming, 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks, depending on if it's personal training. This depends on the person's personality. So if someone gets bored easily, then I'm not going to give them I'm not going to have them doing the same workout program for 12 weeks, because that's going to get boring and mundane to them. So I'll probably do like a 4-week program for them. If someone likes repetition and they like to repeat things, then maybe they're doing the same program for 12 weeks. It also depends on if you're working towards a certain goal. So if you're a power lifter, or if you have specific things that you're working towards, then there's different lengths of time that you should be working towards that. But today I'm just talking about general population. So what should 1 week look like? In my experience and with my recommendation, I would say 2 to 3 strength training focus days with 5 to 15 minutes of a conditioning finisher at the end. 1 day per week of light to moderate conditioning. 1 day per week of intense conditioning. And 1 to 2 days of walking, mobility, foam rolling, stretching, and 1 day off. And that 1 day of intense conditioning, I've seen, and even with myself, if you one time per week, if you can push yourself to that limit that you literally are thinking in your mind, why am I doing this? Or this really sucks. If you can do that one time per week and stay consistent with it, the results will be awesome. I really don't believe if you want to be able to maintain this long term, if you're an adult and you're not necessarily training for a sport, if you pushing yourself to intense levels multiple times throughout the week is going to be really hard to sustain, and it's going to be really hard for you to recover from, especially if there's a lot of other stresses in your life. If you're a busy person, you get stressed out a lot, you're not sleeping a lot, your central nervous system is just going to have a really hard time with this, and it's going to be really hard to maintain it. So first I'm going to show you an example of the week, and then I'm also going to tell you why, in more detail, why I program the amount of things that I do and the things that I do. So Monday would be a strength focus day. Tuesday, maybe it's a moderate conditioning day. So 20 to 30 minutes, and you're going to an intense, you're working out hard enough that you're breathing hard, your heart rate's up, but you can still maintain a conversation, okay? Wednesday is another strength focus. Thursday is a high intense conditioning day. Friday is another strength focus. And then Saturday might be that day that you're taking your walk, you're working on some mobility, foam rolling, and stretching. And then Sunday is completely off. And so on those strength focused days, here is how I program a workout. So first of all, I highly recommend some type of release. So that would be a foam roller, lacrosse ball, and only for like 5 minutes. I honestly don't believe that you need to foam roll your whole body every single time you work out. If you really just focus on the muscle groups around the joints that you're going to be training that day. So like maybe you're doing hip hinges or squats, really focusing on, your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, or maybe you did deadlifts the day before and your glutes are sore. Do you have some specific tightnesses that you're feeling? Then really focus on releasing those areas. Next would be activation and mobility. So about 10 minutes, and I combine the two. So this is working on making sure that you have range of motion in the joints that you need to. So ankles, hips, shoulders, making sure that those joints that should be mobile are moving well. And then also throwing in some activation. So this also depends on what else you're going to be doing that day and making sure that you're getting those muscle groups turned on before you throw heavy weights at them. And then next would be 20 to 30 minutes of your strength, power, and correctives. So I'll throw some explosive movements and plyos in there sometimes, the strength training, and again, like I said before, the different movement patterns need to all be worked throughout the week. So when you're programming a workout, making sure that you're getting all 10 of those different movement patterns in throughout the 3 days, within the 3 days. And then also some correctives. So if someone has a really tight chest and a really weak upper back, making sure we're throwing in some things that are going to loosen up, stretch out the chest and strengthen up the back. And then lastly would be conditioning intervals. So short bursts of hard work, varying in intensity, 5 to 15 minutes. Again, not every single time should the finisher or the conditioning at the end be so hard that you are on the floor, right? We need to make sure that we're not doing that so often that we can't recover from it, okay? So an ideal workout on strength focused days would be 45 to 60 minutes and hitting every movement pattern throughout the week. And if you don't have 45 to 60 minutes, it could be 20 to 30, and maybe you're just doing a little bit of activation and then strength training, okay? So whatever, like I said before, something is better than nothing. So why do I have these specific things in the week's programming? So strength training and having increased lean muscle mass increases basal metabolism, resting energy expenditure, and you burn more calories. So the more lean muscle mass you have, the more calories your body will burn throughout the day. High intensity conditioning is included in there once per week because it burns a lot of calories during and after exercise. It also you also have increase in your body's ability to generate energy, and it can also improve your muscular endurance. But the reason why it's only in there one time per week is because it takes longer to recover from this. So there's also light to moderate conditioning. This type of conditioning can improve cardiovascular function, help you sleep better, and lower your stress and anxiety. And then 1 day of the walking, stretching, mobility lowers stress, keeps the joints moving, and can decrease cravings, clear your mind. There are several central nervous system benefits to this as well. It improves your mood and it improves your recovery. If you can stay consistent to these 6 days, so 3 days of strength training, 1 day of intense conditioning, 1 day of moderate to light, and then 1 day of walking, stretching, mobility, if you can stay consistent with that, you will see amazing results. I've seen some crazy, amazing results for people who have been able to stay consistent with this type of workout programming. And speaking about that, so for results, have a plan ahead of time. So maybe that's, taking out a piece of paper or looking at your calendar and writing down what you're going to do on which days. Or if you're a member of a gym, maybe that's signing up for your classes way ahead of time. Because when you have a plan, you're way more likely to stay consistent. You're way more likely to show up and do the work. So have a plan ahead of time. The other thing is track your work, track your results, and adjust as necessary. So making sure that we're tracking things that we know, are we actually moving in the direction that we want to? And lastly, if you have any questions about anything I just said, or you want help with any of your fitness or programming, or you just want to talk about it, I love talking about this stuff, please reach out to me and let's talk. And lastly, I'm having a retreat in Cabo with women in February. There's 10 spots. If you have any interest in this, reach out to me and let me know.